So we have to, there's another session of Coffee Talk with Mac. Just want to talk about a couple of things that are happening in current events and in our political world and things that are really affecting you and I today that are very important. These are issues that everybody is probably on the back of everybody's mind. But first, Coffee Talk with Mac. Okay, so I have my cup of coffee and we're having a discussion. And I like my coffee. Remember, black, no sugar. All right. And the coffee I'm drinking today is Guatemala Organics. Okay, so this is the coffee, and I like drinking. I spend a little bit extra money. I don't drink coffee throughout the day. I have about 2 cups in the morning. I try not to drink after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I spend a little bit more money on expensive coffee. It's not Maxwell House. It's not Folgers. It's organic coffee. Because although I have studies, if you look at my link to my health and fitness site, Silver Fox Fit Club, www.silverfoxfitclub.com, you'll see I have a couple of studies there on the benefits of drinking coffee. But it should be organic coffee. It should be coffee that's grown organically and grown properly. A lot of the traditional coffees that people drink have a lot of additives or dirt or toxins in it. Yeah, and it's more harmful than good, so you don't get the benefits out of it. So my recommendation is that spend a little bit extra money if you enjoy your coffee because you get really good flavor with organic grown coffee if it's grown properly. And you support local, your small growers, not the big mass-produced growers. So it's like if you go to the farmer's market in your neighborhood and you're buying fruit and vegetables from local farmers, well, when you're buying organic coffee, a lot of these companies buy from local small growers and they have a network of them in different countries, and that's where they get their stuff from. So Organics is the brand I'm drinking today, and I like to mix it up. I don't like to drink the same thing every day, and it's all different. I enjoy it. So again, welcome, Coffee Talk with Mac. So today's discussion is going to be about what's been happening in the news lately, and there's a lot of polarization in American politics, and this probably goes back to some people, some historians, and some experts, political science experts, are tracing this back to probably in the beginning of Bill Clinton's second term, so 96, 97, and that's sort of where we saw a real bad polarization begin in American politics. And it probably could be attributed to the impeachment of Bill Clinton, because many people thought that the Republicans at the time weaponized the impeachment process at that particular time to get back at Bill Clinton. And that's a different, you know what, that's actually a subject of another discussion because there are pros and cons to that impeachment. But there's no doubt that that impeachment at that time really turned people and polarized people, and they used political processes as a weapon. So what we see today is that process being carried out where no middle ground can be found. But there is middle ground that can be found. Both sides, and I'm not talking about mainstream, I'm not even talking about the middle, the moderate Republicans or moderate Democrats. Because let's face it, moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats, they want to maintain the status quo. They're okay with the system the way it's going today. They may say otherwise, but the moderates are the career politicians who benefit from the system the way it is, the status quo. But your far-right Republicans and far-right Democrats want to see change. And both of them, on both sides, they agree on a couple of things. Two things that Republicans and Democrats can come together on, show unity to the American citizens, and two things that they should be working on bilaterally, bi-partisanship. Term limits and campaign reform. Our founding fathers, if you read documents and notes and diaries and journals and correspondence back at the time, at the beginnings of our country, you would see that our founding fathers wanted American citizens to participate in our government, leave their business, their families, their farms, their businesses, their occupations, participate in American government for a few years, 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years, then go back to their business. So they wanted a contribution from all American citizens. Our country should not have career politicians. No country should have career politicians because then that government becomes self-serving for the politicians. They become embedded and they become elitist. They become that the country is there for them and not for the people. They forget who they serve. So we need term limits. Now the question is, there's a couple of questions with that. What kind of term limits are you asking for? That's number one. Number two, how does a term limit proposal come out of committee when you're fighting mainstream status quo politicians on both sides of the aisle? And number three, how do you get support across the aisle? Well, you find common ground. And I think it was found, and this is the bad move, and this is the inexperienced part and the animosity part on AOC, Alexandria Cortez. Okay? Ted Cruz introduced legislation in his committee for term limits. He reached across the aisle 2 weeks ago and asked AOC to work with him on this legislation on the Democratic side. It's something that she has been in favor of. It's something that she supports. And even in her rejection of it, to working with him, she says she supports it, but she can't work with him. Now, that's another topic of discussion because she actually lied in the reason that she gave. Okay, so she defamed Ted Cruz in her response, and she lied about why she felt that way. But that's another topic of discussion. But she missed an opportunity, just as she missed an opportunity for Amazon to create 25,000 jobs, minimum 25,000 jobs in her community that she represents. She missed this opportunity to work across the aisle with a Republican who's considered far-right Republican, which would be very symbolic and show a symbolism of maybe people working together for a common goal. And this is common ground that the far right and the far left believe in this. Because don't forget, the far right, you know why the far right exists? The far right comes into play because they want to buck the status quo. And that's the fight that the Republicans are having within their own party. The moderates are trying to take back the party, and people who buck the system are fighting them. So the moderates believe in status quo. They're the career politicians. They want to keep things going. Now, here's the reason for term limits, and this is why it's a very important issue in American society today, and this is what we should have. And this referendum should be to the people. You can't have the politicians decide their own fate. There should be a national referendum, just like we have state referendums. There should be a national referendum on term limits and let the people decide. And I guarantee you, overwhelmingly, the people will decide to have term limits. So there's 535 representatives in Congress, 100 senators, 435 Congress people, congressional districts. Political scientists agree that almost all of them, the vast majority of them, are going to be won by the party incumbents. It's term after term after term. It's only about 100 or so approximate total seats of the 535 that are usually up for grabs, and that's what they fight for. So why is about 435 seats always going to the incumbent party? It's called gerrymandering. You ever take a look at your congressional district? You see those crazy lines and say, well, how come the district's not set with even boundaries or county boundary? How come that congressional district goes from Manhattan, a couple of blocks in Queens, a couple of blocks in the Bronx, up to Westchester, comes down again, and that congressional district looks like the letter T or looks like the letter Q? Well, that's to maintain status quo. That's to maintain party dominance in that area. And both parties are complicit in establishing party lines, congressional district lines, to maintain control. See, they give the illusion of a two-party system. It's not really a two-party system anymore. Democrats are the dominant party, and they agreed to share power with Republicans to give the illusion of a two-party system to the American people. So we're not really a true democracy with a two-party system. One of the ways to get around that is we need a strong third party, legitimate third party. An independent party is not a legitimate third party because independents usually caucus with either Democrats or Republicans. So they're not a legitimate third party. So we need term limits. Number one, we begin to start cleaning house with term limits. And my suggestion would be term limits of congressmen, 3 terms. You know, either 3 2-year terms or 1 5-year term for Congress people. Okay? This way, they're not worried about reelection because with the 2-year system in place, the second year, not 10 months out of the second year, they're campaigning and collecting campaign funds. And that's another issue of discussion. Campaign refinance laws, changing the campaign financing laws. So make Congress people 1 5-year term, no reelection. They serve 5 years, they're out. Make senators 1 10-year term. Make presidents 1 6-year term. Because if a president wins a second term, the last 2 years of that second term for the president is useless, totally useless. It's clogging the system. It's wasting a lot of time. So president 1 6-year term, senator 1 10-year term, because senate is probably the most important position in Congress, and congressperson 1 5-year term. Get them in, get them out. Okay, and and that's one way of starting to clean up the system. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. The other ways, campaign finance laws, but you can't change the campaign finance laws until you change term limits. I firmly believe there should be no outside private funding. It should all be funded by Congress. Everybody gets a budget. Okay, when they're running for office, if they don't use it, they lose it, and that's it. And they can't increase that budget. So this is what I believe. So, coffee time with Mac.